Amen. So our Bible passage is really short today, but we're going to spend a long time learning about this and reading it. It's one of the Beatitudes, the sixth Beatitude. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Now, we're going to jump into this book, which is Neil Douglas Clutch, Prayers for the Cosmos. As you can see, it's one of my go-to prayer books that I use all the time. I'm going to read from that in a minute. But before I get there, I thought you might want to hear Neil Douglas Clutch saying the Aramaic. You don't want to hear me sing it because it'll be inaccurate. And I found him saying the words in a video in which he was explaining how to play a guitar song. Benefits of being a guitarist, you get the behind the scenes. So here's the voice of Neil Douglas Clutch.
Tubehun Lailain Dad Cain Belebhon Dihanon Nehzun La Allah. Tubehun Lailain Dad Cain Belebhon Dad Cain Belebhon, complete in heart. Dihanon Nehzun La Allah. So Dihanon Nehzun La Allah, to see, to be illuminated. You could say all of the senses opened to, you could say, the smell, touch, taste, feeling of unity. And then the refrain is simply with the word Allah.
If I go back to this, here's a modern translation as well, just because I found it interesting, by Eugene Peterson, his Message version of the Bible, which I used all the time when I was trying to understand the Bible when I'd never read it before. Wonderful translation. He was a pastor, and he rewrote it into everyday language for his congregation. He writes, "You are blessed when you get your inside world, your mind and your heart put right. Then you can see God in the outside world." Okay, so Neil Douglas Clutch offers some translations. I'm going to read them out, but I've also got them here for you to read if you've got good eyesight. So, as maybe you don't know, but Jesus spoke Aramaic, and the Aramaic tradition wrote down his teachings, and you can really, it's a very different way of seeing the world. Different languages have different ways of seeing the world, and it can really open up a depth of who Jesus was when you go back to his language. So the King James Version is, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." But Neil suggests, "Blessed are the consistent in heart, they shall contemplate the one." Or, "Healthy are those whose passion is electrified by deep abiding purpose. They shall regard the power that moves and shows itself in all things." And here's the next one. This is my favorite one, the one that starts aligned. "Aligned with the one are those whose lives radiate from the core of love. They shall see God everywhere." Here's another suggestion for the phrase. "Healed are those who have the courage and audacity to feel abundant inside. They shall envision the furthest extent of life's wealth." Oh, I love that. That's great. And lastly, "Resisting corruption are those whose natural reaction is sympathy and friendship. They shall be illumined by a flash of lightning, the source of the soul's movement in all creatures." Oh, I love that. The source of the soul's movement in all creatures. Yes, absolutely. So I'm using this beatitude as the doorway into sharing one of the aspects of Catholicism. I'm not Catholic, but there's certain things about the different religions that I love. And something I love about the Catholic tradition is all the stuff about the Sacred Heart. Now, I first came across it because I really like kitsch art. And probably about 20 years ago, I remember picking up a candle that looked very much like this from an Army Navy store in Seattle. And I'd never seen these candles before. I grew up in a Church of Scotland Presbyterian country that is kind of devoid of religious bling. So I was like, what is this? And I actually bought one and took it home to Scotland with me, but I had no idea what it was. Now, the Sacred Heart, this is what it is. It's a treasured image of the Sacred Heart. Now, usually it's depicted quite differently. Right? You might see this. This is like an image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus surrounded by cherubim and people worshipping it. And look, it's being cut open and there's a crown of thorns and a crucifix above it. And that's another example. It's very gory. It's a very gory thing. And often it's depicted in the middle of the chest of Jesus or people who are praying to him. So I don't think I would have bought a candle if it had that, because I wouldn't have understood it. I'd just been like, that is a thing. Now, other times you see it like this. Now, this is the Sacred Heart, which is Jesus's heart, next to Mary's heart, which is called the Immaculate Heart. Now, Mary's heart is often seen being pierced. Here, let me get closer up. So there's 7 swords, the 7 sorrows, and Mary's associated with flowers, but also with holding the sorrows of the world. And many people, including me, turn to her when I feel my heart begin to shut down because it gets fearful or overloaded or terrified. So there's the 2 hearts, as I said. On the left there is the Immaculate Heart, and on the right is the Sacred Heart. So left is Mary and right is Jesus. And in my understanding, they both have this Christ consciousness. They both attained. I know that they're related, and I always say that Christ is not Jesus' last name. I'm still saying that. It's not their last name. It's a way of being that they, through their life and love and closeness with God, attained. All right. So you see it all over the place in stained glass windows. And when I was doing the research, I found this image, right? I was like, oh, I like this one. And this came from a website called Sacred and Immaculate Hearts. And it's a Catholic website, and it talks about the devotion of the Sacred Heart. And it says, devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus began in the 11th century. Now, later on, Richard Rohr will say it began even earlier. But according to this website, 11th century, but is firmly rooted in sacred scripture. The most significant source for the devotion that's practiced today came from the visions of a saint. 1647 she was born, Saint Margaret Alcoque, Alacoque. She was a French nun and received apparitions from Jesus. Jesus showed her his wounded heart, aflame with love for humanity and the suffering of humanity. So that is a little bit about the Sacred Heart in art. I wanted, before we moved on, to ask if there was anybody on the Zoom who grew up Catholic that saw these images growing up, and what was it? I mean, I came out as an adult, but to see those images as a child, what was that like? Leanne, you're waving at me. Can you?
I never understood it at all. I was raised Catholic and went to Catholic school and even became a nun when I got out of high school, joined the convent. I was really into being Catholic, but I never ever understood the Sacred Heart, and it never meant very much to me.
I've heard people say that a lot. I've heard it's quite obscure. Hey, Kathy, you're waving at me too.
Yeah, I had a different experience. It wasn't until later, until I was a little older, but I have had image, not so much of the ones you showed, but where it's portrayed as a huge heart all by itself and just lit up. Just sort of, but I've used it for years as a centering for meditation.
Hmm. 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 That's exactly where I'm going, Kathy. So you'll have to email me afterwards and tell me if you have anything that I say that resonates. Um, Suzanne, you're waving as well.
I too grew up Catholic, and
Mhm.
there was never any, I guess I would say, emotion towards it or the crucifix. It was just a symbol up there, and it was totally meaningless to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let me share a little bit more then about how I've been praying with it. And but first, because I'm not Catholic, I went back to the source, and um, first of all, it was Caroline Mice who was one of the people that helped me begin to understand that what I was doing in my prayer life was part of this Catholic Sacred Heart practice. I didn't know, I was just praying. And she said that all of a sudden one day, that image of the Sacred Heart, which she, growing up Catholic, had found quite gruesome, she realized it wasn't the heart of the sacred for her. It wasn't the Sacred Heart. It was the heart of the sacred. It was the heart of the cosmos. And when I heard her say that, to just changing the words around really was helpful to me. Here is a little bit from Richard Rohr. I'm going to paste the link into the chat for those who are on the chat. Sorry, people on Facebook, but if you Google Sacred Heart and Richard Rohr, you will find this. So he writes, and this is quite a long chunk. I thought that he probably knows more about this than I do. So let me read his daily meditation on it that he wrote. Abba Pullman said, "Teach your mouth to say what is in your heart." And many of the desert fathers and mothers have described prayer as bringing your thinking down into your heart. He writes, "It often seemed like soft piety to me until someone taught me how to do it, and I learned the immense benefits of this prayer of the heart." Now, as a Catholic, I was often puzzled by the continued return to the heart imagery among our saints and in our art. The Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Immaculate Heart of Mary were, were both pointing to a blazing heart. And these images are known by Catholics worldwide. But I often wonder what people actually do with these images. Are they merely sentimental? Are they objects of worship or objects of transformation? Such images keep recurring because they must have something important, good, and perhaps necessary to teach the soul. And he asks what might that be? So many have described prayer as being bringing your thinking down into your heart. So next time a resentment, negativity, or irritation comes into your mind and you're tempted to play it out or act on it, instead move that thought or person into your heart space, literally. Then surround this negativity with silence, which is much easier to do in the heart, and you're pumping blood, which will often feel like warm coals. In this place, it is almost impossible to comment, judge, create storylines, or remain antagonistic. You're in a place that does not create or feed on contraries, but is the natural organ of life, embodiment, and love. Love lives and thrives in the heart space. This practice has kept me, he writes, from wanting to hurt people who have hurt me. It keeps me from being obsessive, repetitive, or compulsive in my head games. It can make the difference between being happy and being miserable and negative. the Sacred Heart is your heart too. A heart of fire with love and compassion for the world. And the way that I've been using the Sacred Heart in my prayers, Kathy, you might relate to my images a little bit more than the ones that I showed. I was kind of making a gory point earlier. Oh, no, that's the old ones. Let me find the other ones. So this was the first image of the Sacred Heart that spoke to me. You know, it's full of social justice. It was commissioned, and an artist called Mark Dox created this, Our Lady Ferguson, after police shot a black man. And I found it very helpful to not just feel outrage, but to also feel compassion and love and the healing flooding in to this situation that we don't seem to be able to fix. So that's that's the first image of the Sacred Heart. Now, you've probably seen me share all these images before. And then this is the second one. This one's really important. It sits right over there on my altar. I have this online community called Patreon, right? And they're amazing people, really amazing people. And they're very interested in the songs that I write. And there was a woman in Nova Scotia called Catherine who was praying with me as I was recording Ave Maria, a Gregorian chant that is on my new album. And she sent me this icon. It's called the New Camal di Madonna. It's from Big Sur. There's a monastery in Big Sur, and the artist is Leo Nunfeld. And it's been sitting next to me on my workbench where I write my sermons and where I edit my music. And this is a bit of a fuzzy image. I'm sorry it's fuzzy. I thought that would be clearer than me holding up a little card. And there's something about her heart and the landscape and the Pacific Ocean behind her and the California poppies that I lean in. I really use this as an icon. It becomes, I sometimes with my hands will reach out and touch her heart. And I just started doing this. It was the image with the heart that called to me, right? I didn't read anything. I wasn't preparing a sermon. I just started praying with this card that Catherine sent me. And then I started noticing images on Facebook. This one was on Facebook. This is by a Canadian artist called Heather McLean. It's called Moat. And I love that. It's probably my favorite icon of the Sacred Heart, the heart of the sacred. It's got the galaxies and the universe, and it's one of my favorites that I like to look at and pray with. You know, I'm relating to it, but I'm not really thinking. I'm just leaning into it with my heart. And then this one has been very important to me recently. Catherine also sent me this because she knew that I was pretty devastated. We all are, actually, about the unmarked graves at the residential schools. The way that in Canada and America and Australia, the children of the native people were taken away and placed in boarding schools, and many of them died. And they're just in these unmarked graves, and they predict that thousands of them will be found, hundreds. And they're only beginning to start to do the studies. And it's devastating. It's so devastating. This image helps me pray rather than just switch off. This one's by Andre Prevost, icon writer, who I love his icons. And then I've got one more image of the Sacred Heart. You've seen this one before. This is the Compassion Mandala. It's created by a friar called Robert Lentz. And I was gifted this icon actually by the 4-H worker I used to work with. I used to teach boat building, and it was a 4-H project. I don't know if any of you are part of 4-H. If you're watching from the other side of the world, 4-H is this amazing American institution that teaches children about how to raise chickens and takes nerdy boys and teaches them robots, and the boat building and sailing program I was part of 4-H. And my friend Tanya gave me this when I was holding ritual for a young man in our community who died, a young father, and she gave me this to strengthen me as I held our community in Port Townsend as a pastor. So these images have always been there in the background, but then I started working on Songs for Mary. I got commissioned by Abbey of the Arts to set the Magnificat into song, and they were interested in my recording of Ave Maria. And I started learning about the Catholic tradition of the Sacred Heart, and that gory image of Mary's heart that's pierced actually is a doorway into closeness with God when we are in our most sorrowful place. It's a very healing aspect that somebody before us has survived and remained loving and walked closely with God and then entered into the Sacred Heart of the cosmos. It's a really beautiful thing. And for me, the Sacred Heart is very much about the Immaculate Heart, about Mary's heart, the compassion of the mother, the heart of the mother. But it's bigger than this, because her compassionate heart is placed into the heart of the cosmos. Now, in a moment, we're going to watch a video by Cynthia Bourgeot. She's a wonderful teacher. And in it, she says, nothing can fall out of God. Nothing. And this is so true to the way I see the Sacred Heart. That we are never outside of God. We move and eat and breathe and sleep and have our entire being inside God. But we can shut ourselves off from that life force, and we can shut ourselves out from each other. And we do this because sometimes life is more difficult than we can handle. And the practice of the Sacred Heart can really help us strengthen and remain present and remain open when the world is unbearably full. And usually that unbearableness is either fear or suffering. So here's Cynthia Bourgeot, and I was very touched by the things that she said.
What breaks your heart apart, and what breaks it open?
I think for me personally, what breaks it open is being in the presence of great beauty and of people who, in the face of almost unbearable odds against them, don't react with violence, but hold a ground of dignity. You know, what breaks my heart open is just witnesses like many years ago that the Amish families who found their children were mercilessly gunned down at school, and rather than going to blame and recrimination, they stand not disguising or repressing, but allowing that heart to be broken wide open without resorting to bitterness.
Isn't that weakness? That's
No, that's what I call Eucharistic love. Because the heart that's broken open without resorting to bitterness is the heart of God reaching out to the world. And it's a sacred communion. So that's what touches me. And I guess you'd say that what breaks it apart is what then breaks it open. To watch the suffering, the number of lives that seem to end feeling like they're boxed in every direction, that the system is against you, and it is. To see the wanton violence, to see the crushing out of hope in people by situations that are simply done by cruelty and carelessness. So that wonderful possibility that it exists in each one of us to be a transparent mirror of the divine will to take form, that gets crushed. And you watch it get covered over with a hard edge, And it seems to happen to all of us in some ways as part of putting on the armor that we have to get through life. But that would mean that the breaking the heart open is what goes in the opposite direction of that. Where with the danger still raging out there, we take the armor off, knowing that something will hold us, and whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. Nothing can fall out of God. Nothing.
Nothing can fall out of God. Love that. I don't normally tell the stories that belong to Turtle Island to the indigenous people, because they're not my stories. But I am going to tell one today because it's part of the living history of this nation. It's part of the story of the formation of the Iroquois nation, and it's up on Wikipedia. And I think it's important that the history of this nation not just be the written history that was documented by the people who colonized it. Stories and the myth that have been carefully preserved and handed down are really important. Now, the story I want to tell is the story of the peacemaker. He came from the north across the water to the Mohawk people, one of the 50 tribes that were all warring at that time. The peacemaker came in his white canoe to teach the people the way of peace. But they put him through many trials before they realized that they wanted to follow him. I'm going to read from Wikipedia here. According to some legends, initially the Mohawk rejected the message of the great peacemaker. So he decided to perform a feat to demonstrate his purity and spiritual power. After climbing a tall pine tree in a gully with rapids, the great peacemaker told the Mohawk warriors to chop down the tree. Many onlookers watched as the great peacemaker disappeared into the swirling rapids of the Mohawk River. They believed that he had died, but the next morning they found him sitting near a campfire just outside the settlement. Greatly impressed by the peacemaker's miraculous survival, the Mohawks became the founding tribe in the Iroquois Confederacy. Now, one time I got to do a little bit of ceremony with some Mohawk chiefs, and I don't have very many moments like this, and I'm so grateful that I got to sit at the foot of this elder and hear him tell this story. But he told me a section of the story that I actually learned as a child in Scotland. And he told me that the way of peace, the peacemaker, was not able to be successful without the help of Hiawatha. Hiawatha is this historical, mythical character whose wife and children were killed, and he walked into the forest just wanting to die. His grief was so enormous. But after wandering alone and crying in his grief, he emerged from the forest and he brought condolences to the people. And this is the piece that is in that story about Hiawatha, how the people, even though they, in their heads, understood the way of peace was right, it wasn't until Hiawatha brought the condolences, the healing, that was able to touch the tears that fell from their eyes with soft deerskin and remove the plate from their chest and ease the lump in their throat and remove the wax from their ears that was stopping them from really being able to be alive. There's this bringing of healing. There's this heart aspect that needs to be central to a religious tradition if people are, in fact, to become children of peace. In other words, a practice of compassion and the Sacred Heart, and to feel love with people, to bear all things, is essential if we are to grow and progress as individuals and a collective humanity. I'd like to change gears and share with you pretty much what I do every Wednesday in my midweek service, which is focus on chants that help me draw into my heart and some quotes and sacred words, and then to pour out love for this world. I thought that maybe if I shared how I do this, that might actually be more helpful than me giving you theological citations. So, invite you to sing with me, to drop down in your heart, to just be present to these sung prayers. This first one, I chose this because of Richard Rohr saying how he uses the practice of the Sacred Heart when he's angry at people. I do that with this one too. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. What is loved reveals its loveliness. I'm gonna look twice at you. Until I see the Christ in you. I'm gonna look twice at you. Until I see the Christ in you. When I'm looking through the eyes of love. When I'm looking through the eyes of love. When I'm looking through the eyes of love. When I'm looking through the eyes, I'm gonna look twice at you. Until I see the Christ in you. I'm gonna look twice at you. Until I see the Christ in you. The world doesn't want to be saved. It wants to be loved. And that is how you save it. The The heart is not a holding place. My heart is not a holding place. Thy spirit is golden. My spirit is golden, and I am free to fly. The heart is not a holding place. My heart is not a holding place. Thy spirit is golden. My spirit is golden, and I am free to fly. The heart is not a holding place. My heart is not a holding place. Thy spirit is golden. My spirit is golden, and I am free to fly. When we open our eyes to what is happening, even when it breaks our hearts, we discover our true size. For our heart, when it breaks open, can hold the whole universe. We discover how speaking the truth of our anguish for the world brings down the walls between us, drawing us into deep solidarity. Francis Weller said, "The work of the mature person is to carry grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, and to be stretched wide by them." So open your heart to compassion, the joys and sorrows of this world. This is the road into the Christ consciousness. And perhaps you've heard me say before that I believe the way that we live our lives is our biggest act of prayer. That the way we actually live our lives is our biggest act of prayer. So for a closing blessing, I'd like to share a beautiful embodied prayer written by Peter Mayer. He's a singer-songwriter. You've heard me sing this before. It's called Japanese Bowl. And I invite you to drink in his words deep into your being. I'm like one of those Japanese bowls that were made long ago. I have some cracks in me. They have been filled with gold. That's what they used back then, when they had a bowl to mend. It did not hide the cracks, it made them shine instead. So now every old scar shows from every time I broke, and anyone's eyes can see I'm not what I used to be. But in the collector's mind, all of these jagged lines make me more beautiful, worth a much higher price. I'm like one of those Japanese bowls I was made long ago. I have some cracks you can see. See how they shine of gold. Amen.